The smell of frying grease clung to Evie's skin like a second hide, thick and suffocating. She could feel it in her hair, taste it in the back of her throat, and smell it on her uniform. That miserable blend of cooking oil used again and again, and a kind of despair no cheap shampoo could ever wash away. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, laying a sickly yellow film over everything, making the cracked tile floor look even more pathetic. Her feet ached. They always ached by this point in her shift. But tonight it felt worse. Maybe because she had been working doubles for 3 straight weeks. Or maybe because she knew her landlady was waiting for rent money she did not have. "Evie, the food's up." Ray's voice sliced through the chaos in the kitchen. Evie lifted the plates, meatloaf special for table 6, a burger and fries for the couple by the window, and pushed through the swinging door into the dining area. The evening rush had thinned, leaving only a few regulars nursing cold coffee and the kind of loneliness only a 24-hour diner could hold. Mr. Patterson sat in his usual corner booth, reading yesterday's newspaper. The Bennett sisters shared a milkshake, their laughter too loud, too brittle. And then there was table 12. Evie had not noticed them coming in. 3 men in suits that probably cost more than her yearly pay sat in the booth near the back door, but they were not what made her pulse jump. It was the 4th man, the one leaning back against the wall, positioned so he could watch every entrance, every exit, every person in the room. He wore black from head to toe. Not the faded, cheap black of her work pants, but a black that swallowed light, whispering wealth and danger in the same breath. His dark hair was slicked into perfect order, and even from across the room, Evie could make out the sharp cut of his jaw, the way his fingers tapped a measured rhythm on the table, patient, in a way that felt calculated. The scent reached her before she arrived. Expensive cologne, leather, and something else. Something that smelled like power. "What can I get you, gentlemen?" Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. The 3 men barely glanced at her. But he did, the one in the middle. Slowly, he lifted his eyes. Storm gray, cold and appraising. They swept over her the way a predator assesses prey. Not with desire, not with interest, with an attention that made her feel invisible and exposed at the same time. "Coffee. Black." His voice was low, controlled, with an edge she could not place. "And for the rest of you?" Evie turned to the others, but one of them, the man with a faint scar running across his temple, only shook his head. "We're not hungry." "It is." She scribbled the order into her pad, feeling the weight of those storm eyes still pressing on her. Her hand trembled slightly, and she hated herself for it. She had served plenty of men who scared her, drunk truckers, businessmen who liked to grab, cops who thought a badge meant free meals. But this was different. This man did not need to do anything to take over a room. He simply existed in it, and everything else bent around him like gravity. Evie retreated into the kitchen, heart thudding hard against her ribs. "Table 12 is weird," she murmured to Ray as she poured the coffee. "Weird how? Just weird." When she returned with the cup, the scarred man was speaking on the phone in a low, urgent voice. The other 2 sat stiff and alert, their eyes constantly scanning the diner, but the storm-eyed man, clearly the one in charge, was staring out the window. Evie set the cup down. His hand moved with startling speed, closing around her wrist. Not hard, not painful, but firm enough to freeze her in place. "Your name?" His thumb pressed against the pulse point. Could he feel how fast her heart was racing? "Evie." The word barely made it past her lips. "Evie," he repeated, as if testing how the name felt in his mouth, and something shifted in his expression. Something she could not read. Recognition, maybe. No, that was impossible. She had never seen this man in her life. "Do I know you?" she asked, and regretted it immediately. She should not ask questions of men like this. She should smile, serve, take the tip and forget their faces. His grip loosened, but he did not let go. "No," he said, "but you will." A chill ran down Evie's spine, nothing to do with the air conditioning. "Sir, I need," she began, trying to pull her hand free. Then she heard it. A sound that did not belong here, a mechanical ticking, coming from somewhere very close. Too close. Her eyes slid to the window, to the black SUV parked right in front of the diner. Something was wrong with it. The windows were tinted too dark, and a strange, sharp chemical smell seeped through the crack of the door. The ticking grew louder, and suddenly Evie stopped thinking. There was no calculation. Her body moved on instinct, raw and primitive, driven by 6 years on Chicago's South Side, where she had learned to recognize danger by the way the air changed. "Get down," she screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the sudden chaos. Instead, she grabbed his arm. This stranger, this dangerous man, the one who looked at her like she was a ghost, and she yanked. He was dense muscle beneath that expensive suit, but surprise was on her side. He rose, and she dragged him toward the kitchen, her other hand shoving at the two nearest men. "Move, everybody move." The scarred man started to protest, reaching under his suit for something. A gun, Evie realized with numb horror. But the storm-eyed man barked something, sharp and commanding. The swinging door banged open as she pulled him through. His men followed. Ray looked up, confused. Mr. Patterson began to stand. The Bennett sisters froze with their milkshake between them, and then the world blew apart. The shockwave hit like a physical wall, flinging Evie forward. She felt his arm clamp around her, turning so his body took the force as they slammed into the industrial refrigerator. The sound was deafening, a roaring tear that split the air. Glass shattered. Metal screamed. Someone was screaming. Maybe it was her. Maybe it was everyone. The lights went out. In the dark, crushed between cold steel and warm flesh, Evie could hear his heartbeat. Steady. Too steady for a man who had just nearly died. His breath was hot against her neck, and his arm did not loosen. If anything, it tightened, holding her against his chest as if she were something precious, something worth protecting. "Do not move," he whispered, his lips brushing her ear. "There could be a second device. A second device." The words sank into Evie's shock slowly, like cold water seeping through cloth. This was not an accident. Not a gas leak or faulty wiring. Someone had tried to kill him, and she had just saved his life. The emergency lights flickered on, bathing everything in red. Through the settling smoke and dust, Evie could see the dining area, or what was left of it. The front of the diner was simply gone. Where table 12 had been, there was only twisted metal and broken glass. Where the Bennett sisters had been laughing, there was nothing but rubble. "Oh my God," Evie gasped. "Oh my God, everyone." "Cole, report." His voice cut through her panic, cold and commanding. The scarred man appeared through the haze, blood running from a cut on his forehead, but alive, alert. "Perimeter secure, boss. No second device detected. 4 dead in the dining area. The old man and 2 civilians got out. Responders in 3 minutes. 4 dead. 4 dead because someone wanted this man. A stranger she did not even know the name of. Erased. Get the car. We're leaving. If you have .com." He finally released her, and Evie stumbled back, legs shaking so badly she had to grip the counter to stay upright. "You cannot leave," she heard herself say. "The police. They'll want statements. Someone's hurt. Someone dead," he finished, those storm eyes finding hers in the red-soaked darkness. "Yes. Because of me. That's why you have to come with us." "What?" "No, I can't. You pulled me to safety." He stepped closer, and now Evie could see his face clearly. Blood seeped from a cut above his eyebrow. Plaster dust clung in his dark hair, but his expression was calm. Calm in a way that was terrifying. "That means whoever planted that bomb saw you do it. That means you are a risk, a witness, a target." The words hit Evie harder than the blast. "But I didn't see anything. I don't know anything. I'm just a waitress. I'm nobody. You were nobody." Here, his hand rose, and Evie flinched, but he only brushed dust from her cheek with a gentleness that startled her. "Now you are the woman who saved Nathan Blackwood's life. And in my world, Evie, that makes you everything." Nathan Blackwood. The name echoed in her head, dragging up fragments of news she had half-watched, whispered conversations she had overheard without meaning to. A businessman with ties to organized crime, a man even the police did not dare touch, a ghost who controlled half of Chicago's underworld from the shadows. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. "Boss, we need to move now." Cole appeared in the jagged doorway, urgency finally cracking his professional calm. Nathan's hand slid to the small of Evie's back, and she felt the pressure, not rough, but absolute. This was not a request. "Come with me," he said softly. "Or I will carry you. You choose." Through the smoke, Evie could see Ray sprawled near the kitchen, unconscious but breathing. She could see the ruined dining room, flames beginning to lick what was left of the front wall. She could see her whole life, that miserable, exhausted life of barely surviving, turning to smoke. And she could see the way Nathan Blackwood looked at her with those storm eyes, promising both salvation and ruin. She did not know which frightened her more. "I need to get my bag," she whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. "It's in my locker." Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. 30 seconds. Evie ran. The woman did not know that within the next 24 hours, she would have to save him one more time. And this time, she would have to face the darkest secrets of her own family. If you want to know what happened next, please like this video to support the channel. Do not forget to share the story with friends who love dramatic romance, and hit subscribe and the notification bell so you do not miss the next part. Evie ran as if her life depended on it, because maybe it did. The employees' lockers were at the end of a narrow hallway, the rusted metal door giving its familiar creak as it swung open. Inside, her worn-out purse hung from a hook, small and pitiful, like the life it belonged to. She yanked it down, not needing to check to know what was in it. $23 in tips from last night's shift. A phone with a cracked screen, 3 years old, and her mother's photograph, the only one she had managed to keep, tucked in the small pocket near the bottom of the bag. She pressed the purse to her chest as if it were the last thing anchoring her to reality, and ran back toward the rear. Nathan was waiting by the back door, his tall silhouette cut hard against the backdrop of fire and smoke. He said nothing. He only set a hand on her back and guided her, gently, toward the black SUV idling in the alley. Cole was already behind the wheel, his cold, sharp gaze flicking through the rearview mirror as they approached. Derek and another man Evie did not know stood on either side of the vehicle, hands near their weapons, eyes constantly scanning the darkness around them. The door opened, and Evie stepped into a completely different world. The SUV's interior was unlike anything she had ever seen. Black leather, soft as butter, wrapped every surface, and a faint scent of expensive wood and men's cologne lingered in the air. Small screens blinked in the backs of the front headrests. Soft blue LED lighting ran along the ceiling like a miniature band of stars. And when the door shut behind her, the sound was like a bank vault ceiling, heavy and absolute. Nathan slid into the seat beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. In this tight space, she could smell smoke on his suit, mixed with that expensive note she had already noticed in the diner. His presence was overwhelming, as if he took up all the oxygen in the car. "Go," Nathan ordered, and Cole hit the gas. The SUV surged forward, but Evie turned, her eyes fixed on the rear window. Through the dark tinted glass, she could see Rosie's diner, or what was left of it, burning. Flames licked at the night sky, black smoke rolling upward like a giant snake. The red and blue lights of fire trucks and police flickered in the distance, but they were coming too late. The diner where she had worked for 6 years, where she knew every crack in the tile floor, where she had poured sweat and tears into earning scraps, was turning to ash, and 4 people had died there. Evie's throat tightened. She thought of the Bennett sisters, their bright laughter, the milkshake they had shared. Were they still alive? Or were they among the 4? She thought of Mr. Patterson, the lonely old man with yesterday's newspaper. Ray, who had taught her how to make the meatloaf special. Had they gotten out? They'll investigate. Her trembling voice broke the silence. The police will look for me. I work there. The police will be told you died in the explosion. Nathan spoke without looking at her, his eyes tracking something on his phone. One of the bodies that cannot be identified will be given your name. Evie turned to him, stunned. You can't do that. I have a life. She stopped, because what did she have? A shabby apartment she could not afford. A job that had just been blown apart, literally. No family, no friends, nothing at all. Nathan finally looked up, his storm eyes reading her as if she were an open book. What do you have, Evie? He asked softly, but the question cut deep as a blade. Which apartment? Landlady Thornton on the south side. The one who threatened to throw you out this Friday. Evie went rigid. How do you know? I know everything I need to know. He tilted his head, studying her. 27 years old. Worked at Rosie's diner 6 years. No college degree, no car, no savings account. You send money to someone every month, but that person died 3 years ago, and you still have not stopped. Evie's eyes stung. He was talking about her mother, about the money she still sent to her mother's old account, as if stopping would make her truly disappear. That's none of your business, she whispered. It is now. Nathan lifted his hand, and Evie flinched, but he only gently picked a sliver of shattered glass from her hair. You saved my life. That makes you my responsibility. I don't want to be anyone's responsibility. Then what do you want? He asked, his voice lowering, almost gentle. To go back to that life. Work double shifts until your feet cannot carry you. Eat leftovers from the kitchen because you cannot afford food. Anagle. Evie did not answer. She could not. Because he was right, and that truth burned worse than the flames swallowing the diner behind them. Where are we going? She asked instead, her voice edged with defiance even as her heart shook. Nathan looked out the window, the streets of Chicago sliding past like blurred streaks of light. "Somewhere safe," he said. "Somewhere they can't find you." Evie wanted to ask who they were. She wanted to ask why someone wanted him dead. She wanted to ask why he looked at her as if she were the ghost of someone he had lost. But she did not ask. She only held tight to her battered purse with its $23 and her mother's photo, watched the city where she had lived for 27 years pass beyond the glass, and wondered whether she could ever go back to her old life, or whether she would even want to. They had been driving for about 10 minutes when Cole spoke up, his voice flat but tight as a drawn wire. "Boss, we've got a tail. Black sedan, 2 cars back. Been on us since we left the alley." Evie turned, her heart skittering out of control. Through the dark-tinted glass, she could see it, a sleek car slipping through the thin midnight traffic, keeping just enough distance to avoid notice, and still close enough not to lose them. Its headlights looked like a predator's eyes, watching from the dark. Nathan showed no surprise. He did not even bother to look back. "How many?" he asked, his voice cold as steel. "At least 3, maybe 4. Cole glanced at the rearview mirror, his hands tightening on the wheel. The way they're driving, they're pros, not amateurs. Volkov's people. Nathan said it not as a question but as a fact. He pulled out his phone, tapped quickly, and brought it to his ear. "Derek, get ready. Cole, lose them." Evie did not get the chance to ask who Volkov was. She did not get the chance to do anything, because in the very next moment, Cole slammed the accelerator to the floor, and the SUV roared like a beast waking up. The force shoved Evie back. Her spine pressed hard into the leather seat as the world outside the windows blurred into streaks of light. Chicago at night turned into a hazy labyrinth. Streetlights slid past like falling stars. Neon signs flashed and vanished. Cole drove as if the streets were his private playground, slicing across lanes, cutting through an intersection just as the light turned red, diving into alleys Evie had never known existed. But the black sedan did not quit. It clung like a ghost, showing up in the mirror again every time Evie thought they had escaped. "They know the shortcuts." Cole ground out. "Someone tipped them off." Nathan did not answer. His gaze swept the windows, reading the city like a general reading a battlefield map. Left at the next intersection, into the industrial district. Cole obeyed without a second of hesitation. The SUV leaned frighteningly as it took the sharp turn, tires shrieking on the wet pavement. Evie was thrown sideways, her shoulder slamming into the door hard enough to tear a cry from her. Then Nathan's arm came around her. He pulled her into his chest in one decisive motion. One hand braced on her shoulder while the other gripped the handle in the ceiling. Evie found herself crushed against the hard wall of him, her nose nearly at his throat, and she could smell smoke, dried blood, and something that belonged to him alone underneath it all. "Keep your head down," he ordered right by her ear, and his voice was no longer cold. It carried something she could not name. Urgency, protection. Evie had no time to think, because right then, Derek rolled the window down. Night air knifed into the car, cold and sharp. And then the gunshots came. The sound was nothing like anything Evie had ever heard in movies or on television. It was brutal, cracking and bright, ripping the air apart with pure cruelty. She felt Nathan clamp tighter around her, his arm shielding her head as each shot punched through the night like a death drum. 1, 2, 3 shots, then a horrifying impact. Evie heard metal screaming, glass exploding, and a crash so heavy it felt as if the whole world had collapsed. She could not make herself look. She could only press her face into Nathan's chest and pray, though she did not know who she was praying to, or for what. The SUV slowed. The wind stopped howling when Derek rolled the window back up. "Done." Derek's voice was as flat as if he were commenting on the weather, instead of what had just happened. Sedan hit a light pole. 3 targets. No survivors. 3 dead. 3 lives snuffed out in seconds. And this man reported it like it was routine. Nathan loosened his arm, and Evie lifted her head slowly. Through the rear window she could see the black sedan wrapped around a light pole, the front end crushed like a soda can under a boot. Smoke curled from the engine. There was no movement inside. Evie's stomach surged. She pushed Nathan away, bracing a hand on the front seat, and tried to swallow the nausea rising in her throat. Her whole body shook. This was not a movie. This was not a news story she could turn off and forget. This was real. 3 people had just died in front of her, blood and bone and life ground down as if they meant nothing. "Breathe." Nathan's voice came from beside her, not an order now, almost gentle. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. Slow. Anyone." Evie wanted to scream in his face. She wanted to hit his chest and shout that this was his fault, that those men died because of him, that she wanted nothing to do with this insane world. But she could not. She could only sit there, trembling, trying to breathe the way he told her to, while the SUV kept tearing into the Chicago night and left 3 bodies behind in a wreck of twisted steel. "The first time is always the hardest," Nathan said, his voice low and distant, as if he were speaking to himself more than to her. "But you'll get used to it." Evie wanted to say she never wanted to get used to this. She wanted to say she did not belong in a world where people killed each other as easily as walking and breathing. But when she looked into the storm-gray eyes of Nathan Blackwood, she understood a terrifying truth. She did not have a choice anymore. They reached the industrial district on Chicago's west side when the dashboard clock read close to 2 in the morning. From the outside, the place looked like a graveyard of forgotten buildings, hulking blocks of gray concrete with broken windows and walls smeared in graffiti. But Evie recognized at once that the decay was only camouflage. Security cameras hid in shadowed corners, black lenses glinting like a predator's eyes. Figures moved on the rooftops, long rifles catching the cold moonlight, and at every entrance, men in black jackets stood guard with the wary stillness of wolves defending territory. The SUV stopped in front of a massive iron gate. Cole rolled down the window, reached out, and pressed his hand to a control panel glowing blue. A short beep sounded, and then the gate began to open, slowly, revealing a ramp that led down into the earth. The underground garage was larger than Evie could have imagined, big enough for at least 10 vehicles and lit by strips of cold white LED light. She counted 5 black SUVs identical to the one they were in, 2 sporty sedans, and 1 large truck she did not want to know the contents of. Cole killed the engine, and the sudden silence dropped over them like a heavy blanket. Nathan opened the door and stepped out first, then turned and offered his hand to Evie. She stared at it for a long moment. Those long fingers, calluses at the knuckles, a simple silver ring on his little finger, a killer's hand. A hand that had just shielded her from flying bullets. She no longer knew what she was taking hold of, but she placed her hand in his anyway. They passed through a thick steel door that required both a fingerprint scan and a code, then entered a private elevator that carried them up. When the elevator doors opened, Evie could not stop the breath that slipped from her lips. This was not a safe house. This was a castle. The loft spread out before her like something torn from an architecture magazine. Exposed red brick walls with rough lines full of character, floor-to-ceiling glass looking out over the Chicago skyline, millions of lights blinking like stars fallen to earth. The furnishings were minimal but so expensive Evie could feel it. A charcoal leather sofa, a glossy walnut table, abstract artwork she was certain cost as much as her yearly pay for each piece, an open kitchen with a white marble island, a stainless steel double-door refrigerator, and enough appliances she did not even know the names for. This apartment was bigger than the entire building where she rented a room. "Your bedroom is on the left." Nathan shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over the back of a chair as if it were not worth a month of Evie's rent. "Bathroom inside. Closet has clothes in your size." Evie wanted to ask how he knew her size, but after everything that had happened tonight, the question felt meaningless. She walked toward the room he indicated, pushed the door open, and stopped short. The bedroom was even more beautiful than the rest of the apartment. A king bed with charcoal gray linens and crisp white feather pillows, a crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling, casting warm light, and a walk-in closet she could see through the half-open door, packed with clothing she knew was designer even if she did not recognize the labels. She stepped closer, trembling as she pulled out a cream cashmere sweater. The size tag was still attached. Her size, perfect down to the last detail. "Rules." Nathan's voice from behind her made her whip around. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed over his chest, storm eyes watching her with an expression she could not read. "First, you do not contact anyone from your old life. No calls, no email, no social media. If you try, I'll know." He paused, letting the unspoken threat settle. "Second, you do not leave this apartment, not for any reason. Third, you do not open the door for anyone except me or Cole. I'm a prisoner." Evie did not ask. She stated it. "You're protected," Nathan replied, but they both knew it was only a different word for the same thing. He walked toward her, and Evie felt herself want to step back, but could not. Something in the way he moved, in the way he looked at her, pinned her feet to the floor. "I have to go handle a few things." He stopped 1 step away, close enough that she could smell the smoke still clinging to him. "If I'm not back in 4 hours, Cole will take you somewhere else. There's a bag in the closet with cash, a new passport, and instructions on how to disappear. Do you understand?" Evie swallowed hard. "And if you come back?" A shadow of a smile passed over Nathan's mouth, too quick for her to be sure she had seen it. "Then we'll talk." He turned and walked away, And Evie stood there watching until the elevator doors closed, swallowing his shape back into the earth. The $1 million apartment suddenly became so quiet it felt suffocating, and Evie realized she was completely alone. Alone in a gilded cage. Evie could not sleep. She tried. She truly tried. She lay down on the king bed with sheets soft as clouds, her head sinking into expensive feather pillows, and she closed her eyes. But every time darkness gathered behind her lids, she saw it. The blinding flash, the wall of fire, glass flying like hail, and the screaming. Oh, the screaming. It kept echoing in her head as if someone were hitting play and replay on a broken tape. She saw the Bennett sisters, Lily and Rose, 2 girls only 19, with the same brown hair and the same smile, sharing a milkshake. Their laughter rang bright as bells, too loud, too brittle, as if they were trying to look happier than they really were. Then, in a single instant, the laughter vanished. Only rubble remained, only brick shards and broken glass and blood. Evie jolted upright, gasping, cold sweat sliding down her spine. She could not lie here. She could not stand this silence. She went into the bathroom, turned the shower as hot as it would go, and stood beneath the water until her skin flushed red. She scrubbed her hair, scrubbed her skin, scrubbed every inch of herself as if she could scour away the memory of tonight. But when she stepped out and wrapped herself in the soft terry robe, she could still smell it. Smoke, gunpowder, death. She showered a second time. Then a third. The scent did not leave. Maybe it had sunk into her bones. At 3 a.m, Evie stood with the refrigerator door hanging open. The cold light inside washed over her face, making the dark circles under her eyes and the pallor of her skin impossible to miss. The shelves were crammed with food, fresh fruit, imported cheese, expensive deli meat, and things she did not even know the names of. More food than she had seen in an entire year. But when she thought about eating, her stomach clenched and nausea rose into her throat. She shut the refrigerator and walked away. Her battered old purse sat on the sofa, small and out of place amid the luxury around it. Evie sank down beside it, her hands trembling as she pulled the zipper open. The $23 in tips were still there, the cracked screen phone Nathan would certainly not let her use. And the photograph. She drew it out and held it in both hands as if she were afraid it would fall apart. Her mother stared back at her from the yellowed picture. A warm smile and gentle eyes. Margaret Carter, 42 years old in this photo, before cancer ate through her body, before chemotherapy stole her hair and her smile, before death came and took the only person in the world who had ever loved Evie without conditions. Tears slid silently down Evie's cheeks. Her mother died when Evie was 16. Late-stage breast cancer, found too late because she did not have money for regular checkups. Evie had sat beside the hospital bed, holding her mother's thin hand, and watched her take her last breath in a stark white room that felt as cold as ice. And 4 years before that, her father died in a car accident. At least that was what she had been told. Richard Carter, the man she barely remembered beyond the smell of cigarettes and a dry laugh, vanished from her life when she was only 12. Now Evie was 27. No father, no mother, no family, no home, no job. Nothing at all but a battered purse and a yellowed photograph. And a Mafia kingpin who had claimed she belonged to his world. Evie thought about Nathan. About those storm eyes that looked at her as if she were the ghost of someone. About the way he shielded her when the bullets flew. About the way he touched her cheek, gentle in a way that startled her. For a man whose hands were stained with blood, who was he? Why did he look at her like that? And why, in the middle of all her fear and horror, had she felt safe in his arms? Evie pressed her mother's photograph to her chest and cried until there were no tears left. Outside the glass, dawn began to blush the Chicago horizon. A new day was coming, but Evie did not know what it would bring. She only knew her life had changed forever, and there was no way back. The knock at the door pulled Evie out of the half-awake, half-dreaming state she had slipped into without realizing it. She was still on the sofa, her mother's photograph resting in her lap, eyes swollen from crying and her body exhausted down to the bone. Morning sunlight had already flooded through the wide panes of glass, laying a warm golden wash over the loft, utterly at odds with the storm twisting inside her. Evie. Nathan's voice came from the other side, low and clear. Can I come in? She wanted to say no. She wanted to scream that she did not want to see anyone, did not want to talk to anyone, did not want to exist in this world for one more second. But instead she only whispered a rough, yes, and the door opened. Nathan stepped in, and Evie realized he had changed. A crisp white shirt had replaced the smoke-stained black suit from last night. Sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing strong forearms with pronounced veins, and something she could not keep her eyes from. Scars. They ran along his skin like a map of a violent life. Long, thin lines like knife cuts. Small, round marks like bullets. Mottled patches like burns. Each scar told a story Evie was not sure she wanted to hear. In his hands was a silver tray. "You didn't sleep." Not a question. A statement. "I couldn't," Evie answered, her voice raspier than she expected. Nathan set the tray on the coffee table in front of her. The smell of food rose straight into her face. Golden scrambled eggs, crisp bacon, buttered toast, a glass of fresh orange juice, and a steaming cup of coffee. A perfect breakfast, the kind you got in a 5-star hotel. And Evie's stomach tightened, not sure if it was hunger or nausea. "Eat." Evie shook her head. "I'm not hungry. I didn't ask if you were hungry." Nathan sat in the chair across from her, storm eyes fixed on her with an expression that left no room for refusal. "I told you to eat." She wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him she was not a dog to be ordered around. But there was something in his voice, not exactly a threat, almost concern disguised beneath a cold surface, that made her pick up the fork. The first bite of egg hit her tongue, and Evie realized she was truly starving. She could not remember the last time she had eaten a real meal. Maybe dinner before her shift yesterday. A rushed cup of instant noodles in her shabby apartment. She ate slowly at first, then faster, then nearly ravenous when the hunger rose for real, flaring like fire. Nathan did not speak. He only sat there, watching her eat with an expression she could not read. Not contempt, not pity, something deeper, more complicated, as if he were seeing something in her she did not even know was there. When she set the fork down and the plate was wiped clean, Evie suddenly felt ashamed. She had eaten like someone who had never been fed, in front of a man who lived in luxury, for whom this breakfast probably meant less than a snap of his fingers. "Thank you," she murmured, eyes dropping. "Don't thank me for basic necessities," Nathan replied, his voice flat. "You need food to live. That doesn't require gratitude." Silence stretched between them, heavy, crowded with questions, neither of them said out loud. At last Evie lifted her head and met his storm eyes. "Why are you doing this?" Nathan tipped his head, waiting. "Why did you save me? Why did you bring me here? Why are you feeding me and giving me clothes and protecting me?" Evie said, her voice shaking but refusing to bend. "You don't know me. I'm nothing to you. I'm just a broke waitress in a cheap diner. So why?" Nathan was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Evie thought he would not answer. Then he stood, walked to the glass, and looked out at the Chicago skyline washed in morning light. "Because of the moment you touched me," he said, his voice dropping, almost a whisper. "Because when that bomb was about to go off, everyone in that diner froze. But you didn't. You didn't think. You didn't calculate. You just moved. You grabbed the hand of a man you didn't even know and pulled him away from death." He turned back, and Evie saw something flash in his eyes, something it would take her a long time to understand. "In my world, Evie, when someone saves your life, they become the one you owe. But when you save someone's life, you become the one they have to protect." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him. "You saved my life. That makes you my responsibility. And I never abandon my responsibilities." Evie swallowed hard, her heart hammering. She wanted to say something, anything, but before she could open her mouth, Nathan turned and walked away. "Get some rest," he said over his shoulder. "This afternoon we'll talk more." And once again, Evie was left alone with a million questions, and not a single answer big enough to fill the hollow space inside her. Afternoon came faster than Evie expected. She had managed to doze for a few hours after breakfast, the sleep restless, but enough that her body no longer felt like a corpse walking. When she woke, the sunlight had shifted to a soft peach orange through the towering windows, and Nathan was sitting in the chair across from her, as if he had been there all day, simply waiting for her to open her eyes. Evie sat up, swept her tangled hair behind her ear, and realized she was still wearing the bathrobe. She should have felt embarrassed, but after everything that had happened, embarrassment seemed like a luxury that no longer meant anything. "You slept better," Nathan observed, his voice without emotion. "Were you sitting there watching me sleep?" Evie asked, a shiver crawling over her skin. "No, I just got here." He tipped his head, studying her with the kind of gaze that read every smallest change in her expression. "There's something you want to ask. I've seen it in your eyes since the diner." Evie drew a deep breath. She had been thinking about this through all the hours of tossing and turning the question over in her mind like a pebble in her palm, and she knew if she did not ask now, it would eat her alive from the inside. "I look like someone you used to know," she said, not as a question but as a statement. "From the first time you looked at me, You looked at me like I was a ghost. Like I shouldn't exist. She swallowed, forcing herself to meet those storm eyes. Who was she? Nathan did not answer right away. He sat utterly still, like a statue, and for a moment Evie thought he would ignore the question or tell her to shut up, but then he stood, walked to the glass, and turned his back to her as if he could not bear to let her see his face. Isabel, he said, and the name left his mouth like a curse, heavy and aching. Isabel Hartley. People called her Belle. Evie said nothing. She only waited. She was Marcus Hartley's daughter, one of my biggest rivals in this city. Nathan went on, his voice distant, as if he were speaking from very far away. We met at a neutral party, the kind of event the families throw to pretend they don't want to kill each other. She hated me at first sight. Called me a cold-blooded killer right in front of her father. A shadow of a smile crossed his mouth, bitter and full of regret. I fell in love with her right then. It's not next did. He turned back, and Evie saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Pain. Raw, alive, and old as a wound that has healed but still aches when the weather changes. We met in secret. 6 months. 6 months stealing time from a world that wanted us to be enemies. She was the only person who ever saw me. Not Nathan Blackwood, Mafia boss, but just Nathan. He paused, jaw tightening. Then she told me she was pregnant. Evie felt her heart cinch. I wanted to walk away from all of it. Nathan continued, his voice rough. I wanted to hand the empire to someone else, take Belle far away, build a clean life for our child. A life where the kid wouldn't have to know who his father was, wouldn't have to grow up in blood and violence. He let out a laugh with no humor in it. Naive. What happened? Evie whispered, though part of her did not want the answer. Dmitry Volkov happened. The name came from Nathan's mouth like venom. Alexei Volkov's younger brother, the mad dog of the Volkov family. He found out about our relationship and kidnapped Belle. The demand was simple, my entire southern territory in exchange for her life. Nathan turned away again, his shoulders drawn tight as wire. I refused, he said, each word seeming to be forced from his chest. Not because I didn't love her, but because I believed I could save her. I had men, I had guns, I had a perfect plan. I thought I was Nathan Blackwood, and no one could beat me. Silence stretched, heavy as lead. By the time I got to where Dmitry was holding her, Belle was dead. Nathan's voice broke, just for a brief instant, before he forced it back under control. For hours, a bullet to the head, clean, quick, like her life, and our child's life, wasn't worth a second bullet. Brighters. Evie felt tears sting her eyes, not for herself, but for the woman she had never met, and for the man standing in front of her with a heart that had turned to stone 5 years ago. Nathan, she began, not knowing what she meant to say. You look like her. He cut in, turning to her with eyes reddened in a way he did not bother to hide. That dark brown hair. Those green eyes. The way you hold your head high even when you're afraid. When I saw you in the diner, for a moment. He stopped, swallowing hard. For a moment, I thought she'd come back. Evie stood, her legs trembling, but she still stepped toward him. I'm not her, she said gently but firmly. I'm Evie Carter, a waitress with nothing but $23 and an old photograph. I can't be someone's ghost. Nathan looked at her, and in those storm eyes Evie saw something begin to melt, walls of ice built over 5 years cracking open. Little by little. I know, he whispered. And maybe that's exactly why I can't let anything happen to you. The space between them seemed to shrink, the air thick with feelings neither of them spoke. Evie could feel the heat rolling off him, could smell sandalwood and something that belonged only to him, and she realized she was leaning toward him as if pulled by an invisible force. But before anything could happen, urgent knocking erupted, shattering the moment like a stone thrown into still water. Boss, Cole's voice came through the door, tense and sharp. We've got a problem. Need you right now. Nathan stepped back 1 pace, and the cold mask slid back into place so fast Evie almost thought she had imagined everything. Stay here, he ordered, then turned and went to the door. Evie watched him go, her heart pounding, not knowing what was waiting for them next. Nathan stopped in the middle of the room, his back still to Evie, as if he were weighing whether to go on. Then he spoke, his voice rough and dull, like gravel crushed beneath tires. I found Dmitry 3 days later. Evie did not dare breathe. She stood there barefoot on the cold wood floor, staring at Nathan's broad back, taut as a wire about to snap. He thought he was safe. Thought that after killing Belle, I would collapse, I would be weak, I would be easy to destroy. A dry laugh scraped out of Nathan's throat, holding no humor at all. He was wrong. Gwode. He turned, and Evie saw something in his eyes that made her want to step back. Not the familiar coldness, but darkness, primal and savage, as if the monster he spoke of was looking at her through those storm-gray eyes. "I didn't kill him quickly, Evie," Nathan said, each word falling like drops of acid. "I wanted him to feel it. I wanted him to know. I wanted him to understand a small part of the pain he caused me." He paused, jaw locked. 3 days. I took 3 days with him in a basement where no one could hear the screaming. And when he finally died, he had begged me to let him die from the first day. Evie felt her stomach twist, but she did not look away. She couldn't. She needed to hear this, needed to understand who the man in front of her truly was. "After that, I swore," Nathan went on, his voice now hollow as an empty shell. "Swore I would never love anyone again, would never let anyone close enough to become my weakness. I decided that if the world wanted me to be a monster, then I would become the most terrifying monster they had ever seen." He walked toward her, slowly, one step at a time, and Evie stayed where she was, not retreating, not running. 5 years, Evie. 5 years I lived without feeling anything. No joy, no sorrow, no fear, only emptiness and a single purpose: to expand the empire, destroy enemies, and wait for death to come without having to end it myself. He stopped in front of her, close enough for her to see the red veining in his eyes, close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from him like a banked fire. "Then you showed up," he whispered, and his voice carried something Evie could not define: confusion, fear, and maybe hope. "A waitress with $23 in her pocket, who grabbed my hand and pulled me out of death without thinking. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt something. Everyone." Evie looked at him, and she saw not the monster he claimed to be, but a man who had been shattered and tried to piece himself back together with cruelty and loneliness. "You say you don't feel anything," she said, her voice gentle but certain. "But that isn't true, is it? You still feel everything, Nathan. The pain, the loss, the loneliness. You just buried it so deep you thought it died." She tipped her head, holding his gaze. "But monsters don't feel pain. And you're hurting so much you can't stand it." Nathan went still, as if she had driven a knife straight into his chest. His storm eyes widened, and in that moment Evie saw his mask crack, revealing the man beneath, fragile, wounded, and desperately reaching for something to hold on to. He started, but he could not finish. His hand rose, slowly, as if he feared she would vanish if he moved too fast, and touched her cheek. His skin was rough with calluses and scars, but the gesture was so gentle it made Evie want to cry. "You remind me of what Belle might have been," he whispered, his thumb brushing lightly over her cheekbone. "If she had been born into a different world, a world without blood and violence, she would have been gentle like you, strong like you, willing to look into the dark without running, like you." The space between them narrowed. Evie could feel his breath ghosting over her lips, could see his pupils widening in the fading afternoon light. Her heart hammered, and she knew she should step back, should push him away, should remember who he was and who she was, and that there was no world where they could belong to each other. But she didn't. Instead, she closed her eyes and waited. Nathan's mouth was almost on hers when urgent knocking tore the moment apart like gunfire in the silent night. "Boss." Cole's voice came through the door, tight with a near panic Evie had never heard from the man who was always calm. "Emergency. Alexei Volkov." He sent a message. Nathan froze, and when he stepped back, the cold mask was back in place so fast Evie wondered if everything that had just happened had been nothing but her imagination. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice sharp as steel. "Don't open the door for anyone. Don't leave the room." End quote. Then he vanished through the doorway, leaving Evie alone with her heart racing and her lips still warm from a kiss that never happened. Evie could not stay still in the bedroom. She tried. She truly tried. But after 10 minutes of pacing like an animal in a cage, she decided she needed to know what was happening. She opened the bedroom door and stepped into the main area of the loft, where Nathan and Cole were standing in front of a large screen mounted on the wall, one she had not noticed the night before. Both of them turned at the sound of her footsteps, and Nathan's gaze darkened. "I told you to stay in the room, and I decided not to listen," Evie replied, her voice harder than she had meant it to be. "If this has anything to do with me, I have a right to know." "Alright." Something flickered across Nathan's eyes, maybe irritation, maybe reluctant respect. He said nothing, only turned back to the screen and nodded once at Cole. "Show her." Cole pressed a button, and the screen lit up with security footage. Evie recognized it immediately. Rosie's diner, captured from above, looking down over the dining area. She saw herself standing beside table 12, Nathan gripping her wrist, then her head snapping toward the window. Then she saw the moment she grabbed his hand and pulled, the two of them rushing toward the kitchen just seconds before the front of the diner became hell. "Where did this footage come from?" Evie asked, her voice shaking. "Alexei Volkov," Nathan answered, and the name made the air in the room drop a few degrees. "Dimitri's brother." Evie felt the blood drain from her face. Dimitri, the man who had killed Belle, the man Nathan had tortured for 3 days, and now his brother had footage that showed Evie's face, clear as day. "What does he want?" Cole spoke, his voice flat as stagnant water. He sent a message with the footage. "Says if the boss doesn't meet him, he'll send this video to the police. In the video, you're clearly the only one who realizes something is wrong before the blast. The police will want to question you, and when they transport you to the station, Alexei's people can intercept the car. To take me," Evie said, not as a question. "Or kill you," Nathan added, his voice without emotion. "Depends on what he wants more, to hurt me or eliminate a witness." Evie swallowed hard, forcing her knees not to buckle. "Where does he want to meet?" "Thornton Warehouse," Cole replied. 2 hours. "Boss goes alone." "No." The word left Evie's mouth before she could think, loud and sharp as shattering glass. "You can't go. It's a trap." Nathan turned to look at her, one eyebrow lifting. "Of course it's a trap. Then why are you going?" Evie stepped toward him, her hands clenched so hard her nails bit into her palms. "You just told me how you killed his brother. He wants revenge, and you're going to walk into the tiger's mouth by yourself. Are you worried about me?" Nathan asked, and there was something in his tone, not quite mocking, more like genuine curiosity. Heat rushed into Evie's face, but she did not back down. "I'm worried about myself. If you die, who's going to protect me from Alexei? I'll be an easy target, and I don't want to die in some filthy warehouse because you're too arrogant to see you're being led into a trap." The lie came out smoothly, but they both knew what it was. A lie. Nathan moved toward her, slowly, one step at a time, until he stood right in front of her, close enough that she could see the tension in his face, close enough to feel the warmth rolling off him. "You lie badly, Evie," he said, his voice low and strangely warm. "Your eyes go to the right when you're not telling the truth." Evie's heart hammered, but she kept her chin up, refusing to look away. "I'm not lying." "You are," Nathan repeated, but there was no accusation in his voice, only something softer, something that made Evie want to cry and scream at the same time. "You're worried about me, and that should make me push you farther away, but instead—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "Instead, it makes me want to come back from that meeting alive." Cole cleared his throat, breaking the moment. "Boss, we need a plan. 2 hours. Nathan stepped back, and the cold mask slid back into place. "Right, Cole, call the team. I want snipers on every building around the warehouse, cars at every exit, and enough firepower to level the whole area if we have to. You said you have to go alone." Evie cut in. Nathan looked at her, and a shadow of dangerous amusement crossed his mouth. "Alexei said I had to go alone. He didn't say anything about me not bringing an army." He turned to go, but stopped in the middle of the room and looked back at her over his shoulder. "Evie, if I'm not back in 4 hours, Cole will take you somewhere safe. There's a bag in the closet with everything you need to disappear." He paused, and in that instant, Evie saw something in his eyes she could not name. "But I will come back, I promise." Dinnan glided. Then he disappeared through the door, leaving Evie with a throat tight around her heartbeat and a fear she did not want to admit. She was afraid of losing him, and that was more terrifying than any bomb or bullet. The loft became a command center in less than 30 minutes. Evie stood in the corner of the living room with her back against the wall, watching Nathan shift from the man who had nearly kissed her into a general preparing for war. He stood before the large screen, a map of the Thornton Warehouse area displayed with red and blue markers, while Cole and Derek stood on either side, listening to every order as if their lives depended on it, and maybe they did. "I want snipers here, here, and here." Nathan pointed to 3 buildings surrounding the warehouse. "Derek, you're in charge of Bravo team. Hold the eastern exit. Cole, you stay with me until we're inside, then fall back to support position." "I have doubt, miss." "What about the north exit?" Cole asked. "Liam and Charlie team will handle it," Nathan answered, eyes still locked on the map. "I want every rat that tries to crawl out of that hole either caught or shot." Evie shivered. The calm way he spoke about killing, the way someone might talk about the weather, reminded her exactly what kind of world she was standing in. Nathan turned to Cole. "Call Frank Sullivan." An azation. Cole lifted an eyebrow, rare surprise flashing across the face that was usually carved from stone. "Old Frank's been retired 3 years, boss. He owes me his life," Nathan said, voice leaving no room for argument. "Time to collect." Cole nodded and pulled out his phone, stepping aside to make the call. Derek disappeared through the door as well, probably to coordinate the other teams. The room suddenly felt quieter, and Evie realized Nathan was looking at her. "Come with me," he said, not as an order now, almost like an invitation. She followed him into the primary bedroom, the room she had not entered, and she understood immediately why. This was not a bedroom. It was an armory. A long glass cabinet ran along the wall, filled with guns of every size. Shining daggers lay neatly arranged in an open drawer, and on the bed, black clothing and a bulletproof vest had been laid out, ready. Nathan pulled off his white shirt, and Evie tried not to look. She failed. His back was a canvas of scars, long and short, crossing and overlapping like a map of a life spent fighting. She saw a large scar running from his left shoulder down the center of his back, like the slash of a knife or a sword. And on his right shoulder blade, a round scar she guessed was from a bullet. He put on the vest, then pulled a fitted black shirt over it. A shoulder holster went on, the gun sliding into place with a cold metallic click. He checked the magazine, racked the slide, then seated it again with the ease of someone who had done it thousands of times. Then he sat on the edge of the bed and lifted the leg of his pants. Evie watched him draw a small knife, the blade flashing, and tuck it into the black boot. "You're looking at me like I'm a monster," Nathan said, without lifting his head. "I'm looking at you like you're getting ready to die," Evie answered, her voice shaking more than she wanted to admit. Nathan stood and faced her, dressed in black and armed to the teeth. He looked like an angel of death out of a nightmare, but those storm eyes held something softer when they looked at her, something she was beginning to recognize as belonging only to her. "Brennan will be outside the door," he said. "He's young, but he's good. He'll protect you." "One person?" Evie asked. "You're taking an army and leaving one man to guard me?" "Because no one knows you're here," Nathan replied. "And because I need every man at the warehouse to make sure I come back to you." The words stole Evie's breath. Nathan went to the closet, opened a hidden drawer she had not noticed, and pulled out a small black duffel bag. He placed it in her hands. Inside is $50,000 in cash, a new passport with a different name and identity, and detailed instructions on how to disappear. He said, serious, "If I'm not back in 4 hours, Brennan will take you out the back. You'll drive to the airport, get on the first flight to anywhere, and never look back." "Nathan," Evie began. "Promise me." He cut in, his hand closing around her shoulder, tight enough that she could feel the desperation under the calm surface. "Promise me that if something happens, you'll run. You'll live. You won't do something stupid like trying to save me." Evie looked into his eyes, and she saw fear. Not fear of dying, but fear of leaving her alone in this world. Fear of failing to protect her the way he had failed Belle. "I promise," she said, and the lie slipped out sweet as honey. Nathan held her gaze a long moment, as if he knew she was lying but did not have time to argue. Then he nodded, let go of her shoulder, and moved toward the door. Evie watched him go, the bag heavy in her hands, and knew she would never keep that promise. Nathan paused at the threshold, his hand already on the knob but not turning it. He stood there with his back to Evie, and she could see his shoulders drawn tight beneath the black fabric, as if he were fighting with himself. Then he turned. Those storm eyes found her in the fading afternoon light, and Evie saw something in them she had never seen before. Fragility. Nathan Blackwood, the Mafia boss who controlled half of Chicago's underworld, the man who had tortured an enemy for 3 days and felt no regret, was looking at her as if she were the only thing he was afraid to lose. "There's something about you," he said, his voice low and rough. "Something I can't explain. When I look at you, I don't just see Belle anymore. I see—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "I see a reason to want to survive." Evie felt her heart miss a beat. Nathan. But before she could say another word, he crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides. His hand lifted her face, rough fingers cupping her cheek, as if she were something precious and breakable, and then he kissed her. The kiss was not gentle, not sweet. It was possessive and desperate, as if he were trying to imprint the taste of her into every cell in his body, as if this were the first time, and might also be the last. His mouth was hot on hers, demanding and necessary enough to leave her dizzy. Evie knew she should not kiss him back. She knew this was madness, danger, everything she should run from. But her body did not listen to reason. Her hands rose, fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer as her lips parted to take him in, as if she had been waiting for this moment her whole life without knowing it. The taste of the kiss was goodbye braided with forever. It was fear of loss and a thin, fragile hope. It was two broken people finding each other in the rubble, not knowing whether they would have enough time to stitch themselves back together piece by piece. Evie felt the gun in his shoulder holster pressing against her chest, the knife hidden in his boot brushing her leg as he dragged her closer. Cold weapons everywhere. A cruel reminder that the man kissing her was a killer, and the world he lived in was a world of blood and violence. But she did not care. In this moment, she did not care who he was, or what he had done. She only knew he was here, kissing her like she was oxygen, and he was drowning, and she did not want it to end. Nathan broke the kiss first, but he did not let her go. His forehead rested against hers, hot breath washing over her swollen lips, and those storm eyes stared at her with an intensity that made her feel like she might melt. "When I come back," he said, voice hoarse, "we'll talk, a long talk. About you, about me, about all this madness." Evie nodded, not trusting her voice. "Promise me you'll be here when I get back," Nathan said, and it was not an order, it was a plea. "I promise," she whispered, and this time she almost believed it. Nathan kissed her again, brief and sweet, as if he could not help himself. Then he stepped back, his hand leaving her face with obvious reluctance, and walked out of the room without looking back. The door shut behind him, and his footsteps faded down the hall. Evie stood there, her lips still burning, her heart racing, and the duffel bag with $50,000 and a fake passport weighing heavy in her hands. She had promised she would stay. Promised she would run if something happened. Promised she would not do anything stupid. But when she looked out through the glass and saw the line of black SUVs pour out of the underground garage and vanish into the Chicago night, she knew she would not keep any of those promises. She would not sit and wait like a princess in an ivory tower while the man who had just kissed her walked into death. No. Evie Carter had saved Nathan Blackwood once, and if she had to, she would save him again. Evie waited 15 minutes after the last engine noise had faded completely before she moved. She stepped to the bedroom door and eased it open just a crack, only wide enough to see outside. Brennan was sitting in the chair placed beside the elevator doors, his shoulder against the wall, his legs stretched out in front of him. He was young, maybe 26, 27, with sand-colored hair and a face that still held traces of innocence. This job had not yet scraped away. He was staring at his phone, thumb sliding over the screen with the bored impatience of someone assigned a task he did not truly understand. One guard, young, bored, alone. Evie closed the door gently and went back to the main bedroom, the room where Nathan had prepared his weapons before he left. She opened the closet and searched through the expensive clothes until she found what she needed: a long black coat that would hide her small frame, a dark baseball cap, and a pair of black boots a little too big but still wearable. She changed quickly, shoved her hair up under the cap, and studied herself in the mirror. Not perfect, but enough to blend into the dark. Then she opened the drawer Nathan had used when he pulled out the emergency bag. Her heart kicked wildly when she saw it, a compact handgun lying still on black cloth. She had seen guns in movies, on television, even in the hands of men last night. But she had never touched a real one. Her hand shook as she lifted it. It was heavier than she expected, cold, and terrifying in a way that numbed her. Evie felt her stomach twist as she checked it the way she had seen in films, releasing the safety, looking at the magazine. There were bullets. 6, if she counted right. 6 rounds, and she did not even know if she could bring herself to pull the trigger. But she slid the gun into the pocket of her coat anyway. Better than nothing. The next step was the hardest part. Evie picked up the receiver of the internal phone in the bedroom, the one she had realized connected to the building's security line. She drew a deep breath, forcing her voice steady when she spoke. "Hello, I need food brought up to the room." And the voice on the other end sounded familiar, probably one of the guards downstairs. "What would you like, ma'am?" "Anything. Sandwiches, fruit, and coffee." Evie kept her tone as normal as she could. "Mr. Blackwood said I need to eat." "Understood. 10 minutes. Evie set the receiver down and waited. 10 minutes passed like 10 hours. She stood behind the bedroom door, both hands gripping a heavy crystal vase she had taken from a display shelf. Her heart pounded so hard she was afraid Brennan could hear it from outside. The elevator chime rang. Footsteps followed. A knock. "Room service," a voice called. Evie heard Brennan stand, heard him walk to the door. The lock clicked. The door opened. "Just leave it, I will." She did not let him finish. Evie burst out from behind the bedroom door, the crystal vase raised high. Brennan turned, eyes widening in shock, but it was too late. She brought the vase down on his head with every ounce of strength her thin body could gather. Brennan collapsed as if someone had pulled his bones out from under him. The delivery man stood there, mouth hanging open, the tray clattering to the floor. Evie did not think. She lunged at him, shoved him backward, then ran into the elevator and hit the button to close the doors before he could react. Her heart hammered as the elevator descended. She rifled through Brennan's pockets, the ones she had managed to grab at in the instant before she ran, and found a phone and a ring of keys. And more important, she remembered the security code she had seen Brennan enter on the keypad when he started his morning shift. 4 numbers. She had watched his fingers move, had memorized the positions without knowing, in that moment, that it would matter. The underground garage was empty and silent. Most of the vehicles had followed Nathan to the warehouse, but a few were still there, and Evie chose the smallest black sedan, the least noticeable. Her hands trembled as she unlocked it with the remote on the keyring, as she slid into the driver's seat and pressed the start button. The engine growled to life, and Evie drove toward the gate. The blue glowing control panel demanded the security code. She entered the 4 numbers she had seen Brennan type. Her heart stopped for a moment that felt endless. Then the gate opened. Evie pressed the gas, and the sedan shot into the Chicago night, heading east, toward Thornton Warehouse, toward the man she could not let herself lose. She did not know what she was doing. She did not know if she could change anything. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would not sit and wait while Nathan Blackwood died. Not after that kiss. Not after everything. The industrial district on Chicago's east side at night looked like a graveyard of dead industrial dreams. Evie slowed as she drove deeper into the maze of abandoned warehouses and rusted container yards. Streetlights were scarce out here, their weak yellow glow only making the darkness between them feel thicker. The air carried faint traces of seawater and machine oil as she drew closer to the docks, where shipping containers were stacked like enormous bricks of rusted metal. She parked 3 blocks from Thornton Warehouse, in a dark corner where the black sedan nearly dissolved into the night. Her heart hammered as she killed the engine and stepped out, the night cold cutting into her skin like a blade. The boots that were too big rubbed her heels with every step, and she knew that by the end of tonight her feet would be blistered raw. But it did not matter. Nothing mattered except finding Nathan. She walked through the shadows, keeping close to the container walls, trying to make her steps as silent as possible. 6 years on, Chicago's South Side had taught her how to move without drawing attention, how to melt into darkness as if she belonged to it. And now those survival skills were keeping her alive. When Thornton Warehouse came into view, Evie stopped and watched. The building looked like a skeleton from the industrial age. Gray brick walls smeared with bright graffiti, shattered windows opening into thick darkness, the roof sagging at one corner as if the whole place were slowly collapsing. Derelict, ominous, perfect for a showdown where no one wanted witnesses. She saw Nathan's SUVs parked out front, 2 glossy black shapes like resting predators. But not only that, when Evie looked closer, she spotted 3 more vehicles tucked behind a line of containers to the east, nearly invisible in the dark unless you were searching for them. Black sedans. No logos, no markings, and definitely not Nathan's. Alexi's backup. Nathan had been right when he said it was a trap. But even with the army he had brought, Evie was not sure he knew about the cars hidden behind the containers. She was not sure he knew his enemy had more men than he thought. Evie lifted her gaze to the surrounding rooftops, and she saw them. Dark shapes lying flat against the roof lines, the faint glint of rifle scopes catching moonlight like animal eyes. Nathan's people. Snipers. At least 3 she could see. Maybe more in corners she could not. But would they be enough? She slid along the warehouse's western wall, staying clear of light and sightlines from both sides. The boots scraped and bit at her feet, but she clenched her jaw and kept going. Every step carried her closer to Nathan, and closer to danger. She found a side door set back in a dark recess where the graffiti was so thick it nearly hid it. She put her hand on the handle, heart pounding, and turned. It was unlocked. Evie did not know if it was carelessness or intention, but she had no time to wonder. She eased the door open just enough to slip through, and stepped into the dark. Inside the warehouse it was colder than outside, the air thick with dust and the sharp tang of rusted metal. Evie paused to let her eyes adjust, and slowly the shapes began to emerge. Stacks of rotting wooden crates, abandoned industrial machinery, and farther in, a dull glow from the central area of the warehouse, where she could hear voices carrying, Russian braided with English. She found a metal staircase that led up to a catwalk above, gridded steel running along the warehouse's inner wall. From up there, she could see the whole space below without being noticed. At least she hoped so. She climbed, each foot placed carefully on the rusted steps to keep from making noise. Her hands clamped the railing, her heart pounding so hard she was afraid it would betray her. When she reached the catwalk and looked down onto the main floor beneath, her breath caught in her throat. Nathan was standing there, Cole beside him, facing a group of men she had never seen. And in the center, a gray-haired man with a hard-carved face was speaking to Nathan in a voice cold as ice. Alexei Volkov. Evie gripped the railing, the gun in her coat pocket heavy as a reminder that she did not belong here at all. But she was here now, and she was not leaving. From the catwalk above, Evie could see the entire main floor of the warehouse like a stage under dim light. Weak illumination from industrial bulbs hanging loose from the ceiling poured down in dusty beams, and Nathan stood right in the center of one of those beams. He looked like a statue carved from shadow and steel, shoulders squared, chin lifted, storm eyes unblinking as he faced his enemy. Cole stood beside him, arms hanging at his sides, but Evie knew it would take only a fraction of a second for him to draw his gun. Their calm was so frightening the air itself seemed to thicken, as if the warehouse had frozen around them. Across from them, about 10 meters away, stood Alexei Volkov. Evie had imagined what Nathan's enemy might look like, but the reality still made her shiver. Alexei was 52, his white-gray hair cut short and neat, a face that might once have been handsome now carved deep by lines of hatred and suffering. His eyes were ice-cold, holding no emotion except pure hostility. 4 gunmen stood behind him, faces blank, weapons in hand, ready to spit fire. "You came alone, like you promised," Alexei said, his Russian accent heavy but his English clear. "I'm surprised. I thought Nathan Blackwood would bring an entire army. Ever. I came alone inside," Nathan replied, his voice flat as still water. "You said nothing about me having no one outside." Alexei laughed, a dry sound like autumn leaves crushed underfoot. Still twisting words, like the old days. "Dmitri used to say you were the most slippery bastard he ever met." That name dropped the temperature of the room by a few degrees. Evie saw Nathan's shoulders tighten, even though his expression did not change. "Your brother was the bastard who killed the woman I loved," Nathan said, each word falling like acid. "He killed her while she was carrying my child. He deserved every second of pain I gave him, and he deserved the death he got." Alexei's face warped with anger. "Dmitri was my brother, blood of my blood, and you tortured him for 3 days like an animal." "He treated Belle like an animal first," Nathan said, his voice cold as steel. "I only returned what he earned. It's not Ted again. Then you will receive what you earned." Alexei signaled, and 2 of the gunmen behind him moved. They disappeared into the darkness for a moment, then returned, dragging someone with them. Evie's heart stopped when she saw the girl. She was young, maybe around 20, with long black hair and blue eyes flooded with terror. Blood ran from a cut at her temple, staining one side of her pale face. Her hands were bound behind her back, her mouth gagged with a strip of black cloth, and she trembled so violently she could barely stay standing. "This is Katya," Alexei said, his voice frighteningly calm. "My niece, my sister's daughter. She knows nothing about the family business. She thinks her grandfather is an importer of antiques." Nathan said nothing, but Evie saw his jaw lock hard. "She is innocent," Alexei continued, yanking Katya closer and pressing the barrel of a gun to the girl's temple. Katya sobbed behind the cloth, her blue eyes pleading toward Nathan as if he were her last hope. "Just like your Belle was innocent. Just like your unborn child was innocent. Let her go," Nathan said, and for the first time Evie heard something in his voice besides cold control. Tension, a strain held tight. "She has nothing to do with this. I have Livin. Belle had nothing to do with the war between you and Dmitri," Alexei shot back, smiling without warmth. "But that didn't stop my brother from killing her, did it? And that didn't stop you from torturing him to death." He pressed the gun harder into Katya's head, and the girl's sobs grew louder. "An eye for an eye, Nathan," Alexei said, his voice echoing through the silent warehouse. "You took my brother. I take something of yours. And I know about your little waitress, the girl who saved you from the bomb. The girl you are hiding in your safe apartment." Evie felt the blood drain from her face. "Where is she, Nathan?" Alexei asked, tilting his head like a snake studying prey. "I wonder if she is as innocent as Katya. Or have you already taught her how to kill?" Nathan did not answer, but Evie saw his hand shift closer to the gun in his holster. "This is your choice," Alexei said, voice cold as ice. "Give me your southern territory, give me your girl, and Katya lives. Refuse, and her blood will be on your hands." Silence stretched, heavy as lead. and Evie knew she could not stand still and watch any longer. "I'm not his Evie." Her voice echoed through the warehouse before she even realized she had spoken. Every head snapped up toward the catwalk, guns lifting, eyes searching for the source of the sound. And they found her, a small figure on the metal walkway, hands trembling around a pistol she did not even know if she could bring herself to fire. Nathan saw her first, and the look on his face made Evie's heart tighten. Shock, horror, and something like pure desperation. "Evie, no," he shouted, his voice tearing through the still air. "Yes," she answered, and started down the stairs. Each step on the metal treads rang out like a bell in the stretched silence. Evie could feel every gaze locked on her, every barrel aimed her way, and she knew that one wrong move would get her killed before her feet ever reached the floor. But she did not stop. She could not stop. When she stepped onto the cold concrete, she moved forward, crossing the open space between the two sides as if she were walking a wire. Nathan stood on one side, his face drained of color, his hand gripping the butt of his gun but not drawing it, afraid of triggering the situation. Alexei stood on the other, ice-cold eyes assessing her with curiosity edged by contempt. "Who are you?" Alexei asked. The gun was still at Katya's head, but his eyes were on Evie. "I'm Evie Carter," she said, forcing her voice to hold steady even as her heart slammed so hard she thought it might burst. "The waitress you're looking for, but you've misunderstood me." "Evie, shut up," Nathan growled from behind her. "Turn around, now." She did not turn. She could not. "I'm not his lover," Evie went on, staring straight into Alexei's eyes. "I'm not a weapon, not a weakness, not anything. I'm just a poor girl who worked the night shift in a cheap diner, and I happened to be standing in the wrong place at the exact moment someone tried to blow up a Mafia boss." She stopped and drew a slow breath. "Killing me means nothing. I'm not valuable to him. I'm nothing." "You're lying," Alexei said, but there was a thin thread of doubt in his voice. "Blackwood doesn't protect people who have no value. He's protecting me because I saved his life and became a witness," Evie said, truth and lie braided together so cleanly they sounded like one. "And because I have something you want." Alexei lifted a brow. "What?" "Footage," Evie said, and she saw his gaze shift. "Security camera footage from the diner that night. You have a copy, but I have the original, and I sent it to a secure email address with an automatic instruction to send it to the police if I don't enter a code within 24 hours. It was a complete lie. Evie did not have any footage. She did not even know how to set up an automatic email, but she had learned from 6 years on the South Side that sometimes a convincing lie was worth more than the truth. "You're bluffing," Alexei said, but the gun lowered slightly from Katya's head. "Maybe," Evie said, calmer than she felt, "but are you willing to bet? If I'm telling the truth, that footage will show the police your face, your men's faces, and proof you were behind the bombing. Do you want the FBI knocking on your door tomorrow?" Silence stretched between them, tight as a wire ready to snap. "This is my offer," Evie said, taking one more step toward Alexei. "Let the girl go. Release her, and I'll give you the link to delete the original. No one has to die tonight." Quote, Katya stared at her through tears, blue eyes full of hope and terror. She was only 20 years old, 7 years younger than Evie, and completely innocent in this war. Alexei studied Evie for a long moment, his cold gaze sweeping from head to toe as if he were trying to read the inside of her skull. "You've got guts," he said at last, a shadow of a smile touching his mouth. "I'll give you that. A waitress walks into a wolf's den with a gun she doesn't even know how to use, and bluffs a Russian mafia boss." He lowered the gun from Katya's head and signaled to the 2 gunmen beside him. They let the girl go, and Katya stumbled forward. Cole moved instantly, pulling her back behind Nathan. Evie let out a breath, but she knew it was not over. "However," Alexei said, the cold returning to his voice, "I don't believe you have any footage at all. End day." He raised the gun, aiming it straight at Evie's chest. "You're just a stupid girl playing a game you don't understand." And before Evie could react, his finger tightened on the trigger. Time seemed to stop in the instant Alexei's finger tightened on the trigger. But Nathan was faster. He moved with a speed Evie did not think a human being could reach, his hand drawing the gun from his holster in one smooth motion like flowing water, and he fired before Alexei could finish what he was doing. The shot cracked like thunder in the sealed space of the warehouse, vicious and ear-splitting, and Evie saw Alexei's gun fly from his hand as if someone had kicked it away. Blood burst from his wrist, dark red under the weak yellow lights, and his scream tore through the air. Then hell broke loose. Evie did not know who fired after that. Everything happened too fast for her mind to track. Gunfire stuttered non-stop like fireworks, flashes sparking from every corner of the dark warehouse. She saw Cole move sideways, his gun barking with deadly precision. She saw one of Alexei's men go down, then another, blood blooming into red flowers across their shirts. Survival instinct slammed in, and Evie did the only thing she could think to do. She hit the floor and crawled. The concrete was freezing against her stomach as she dragged herself toward the nearest support pillar, elbows and knees scraping raw on the rough surface. Gunshots thundered all around her, bullets slamming into metal and concrete like hail, and her ears rang so hard she could barely hear anything but a shrill buzzing. She did not know if she had been hit. She felt no pain, but she felt nothing at all except pure fear crushing her chest. She reached the pillar and pressed her back against it, gasping, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The small pistol was still in her hand, clenched so tightly her fingers had gone white, but she could not make herself look at it. She could not make herself look at anything but the concrete that was shielding her from the storm of bullets. Then silence, sudden, and more terrifying than the gunfire. Evie sat there, back against the pillar, barely breathing. Her ears still rang, the world muffled as if wrapped in cotton, but she could hear footsteps, slow, steady, coming toward her. She peered around the edge of the pillar, and what she saw made her want to vomit. Alexei's 4 gunmen were scattered across the warehouse floor, blood spreading out beneath them like dark pools in the dim light. No one moved. No one breathed. In seconds, 4 lives had been snuffed out like candles in the wind, and Nathan was walking toward Alexei. The Russian Mafia boss was on his knees, his left hand clamped around his bleeding right wrist, his face pale with pain and blood loss, but his eyes were still cold, still full of hatred as he watched Nathan approach. Nathan stopped in front of Alexei, gun still in his hand, the barrel still smoking. He looked down at his enemy with an expression Evie had never seen before, not cold, not angry, but something deeper, darker, like an abyss staring back into an abyss. "You pointed a gun at her," Nathan said, his voice low and dangerous, like the growl of a beast. "You threatened her. She's nothing." Alexei spat, blood on his lips. "Just a stupid girl you picked up from a cheap diner." Nathan pressed the gun to Alexei's forehead, and Evie saw his finger tightening on the trigger. "She's everything," Nathan said, and the words carried the weight of a vow. "And you just made the last mistake of your life when you touched what belongs to me. It's no doing." Evie rose, her legs shaking, and stepped out from her shelter. She walked past the bodies without looking down, through the blood without stopping, moving toward Nathan and Alexei, as if an invisible cord were pulling her. "Nathan," she called, her voice ragged with fear and gun smoke. He did not turn, but she saw his shoulders tense at the sound of her. "You killed my brother," Alexei said, staring straight into the barrel without an ounce of fear. "You think I'm going to beg for my life? I'm Volkov. I don't beg anyone." "I don't need you to beg," Nathan said, his finger tightening harder on the trigger. "I just need you dead." Evie looked at Nathan's finger on the trigger, at his hard expression, and she knew that if she did nothing, he would fire. He would kill Alexei right here, right now, and part of him would die with it. The part she had just touched, the part he had just shown her, would be buried forever under one more layer of blood. She could not let that happen. "Nathan," she called again, stronger. "Don't." Nathan did not turn when Evie called. He stood there, the gun still pressed to Alexei's forehead, and spoke in a voice cold as steel being sharpened. "You don't get to look at her. You don't get to breathe in her direction. You don't get to think about her." Each word fell like a death sentence. "If I hear her name come out of your mouth one more time, I'll cut out your tongue before I put a bullet in your head." "I know." Alexei spat blood onto the floor, a rasping laugh clawing up from his throat like the sound of bones cracking. "She's your weakness, Blackwood," he said, ice-cold eyes locked on Nathan without a flicker of fear. "You can kill me tonight, but there will be someone else. There will always be someone else. And they'll use her to destroy you, the way Dmitri used Belle." Evie saw Nathan's shoulders go rigid, saw his finger tighten harder on the trigger. "Then let her destroy me," Nathan said, his voice low and lethal. "But you won't live to see it." Evie knew she had to act, right now, before it was too late. She walked toward them, stepping through a pool of blood she could not make herself look at, past bodies she forced herself not to think about. Every step brought her closer to Nathan, closer to the thin line between man and monster where he was balancing. "Nathan." She stopped beside him, close enough to touch, close enough that he could hear her heartbeat hammering. "Don't do this. You don't understand," Nathan said, still not looking at her. "He threatened you. He put a gun on you. He has to die." "I understand," Evie said, her voice gentle but steady. I understand you want to protect me. I understand you're angry. But Nathan, if you kill him like this, you're still just the monster they say you are. Aris, I am the monster, Nathan said, and the words carried the bitter acceptance of a man who had stopped trying to be anything else. No, Evie said, and she put her hand on the arm that held the gun. She felt the muscle locked hard beneath the fabric, felt the strength coiled in every tendon. You're the man who shielded me when the bomb went off. The man who fed me when I was hungry. The man who told me about Belle and showed me you can feel, you can hurt, you can love. She stepped in front of him, placing herself between the barrel and Alexei, forcing Nathan to look into her eyes. Belle loved you, she said, and she saw him flinch as if she had stabbed him. She loved you enough to carry your child, enough to believe you could become someone better. If you kill him like this, with rage and hatred, you're betraying everything she believed about you. Belle is dead, Nathan said, his voice cracking. She died because I wasn't fast enough, strong enough, ruthless enough. No, Evie shook her head. She died because Dmitri was a psychopath, not because you lacked ruthlessness, and killing Alexei won't bring her back. Silence stretched between them, heavy as if the whole world had settled onto Nathan's shoulders. You said I remind you of what Belle could have been, Evie went on, her voice a whisper but not weak. Then show me who you can be. Show me the man Belle loved, the man who wanted to wash his hands and build a clean life. Show me you can choose mercy instead of hatred. Nathan looked at her, and Evie saw the war being fought in those storm eyes. The monster that wanted blood, wanted revenge, wanted Alexei dead by his hand. But something else was there too. Something softer. Something she had woken up in him these past few days, fighting to be seen, a moment that seemed endless. Then Nathan lowered the gun. 24 hours, he said, his voice rough as if the words were scraping his throat raw. You have 24 hours to get out of this city. Take your men, take your empire, and never come back. Alexei stared at him, stunned for the first time all night. If I see your face after sunset tomorrow, Nathan continued, the cold returning, I won't stop. No one and nothing will be able to stop me. Do you understand? Alexei nodded slowly, blood still running from his wrist. Nathan turned to Cole. Get him out of here. Make sure he and his men leave. Cole nodded and moved to Alexei, hauling him up without much gentleness. When they disappeared through the warehouse door, Nathan turned back to Evie, and she saw something in his eyes she could not name. Maybe gratitude, maybe love, maybe both. You saved me, he whispered. For the second time, Evie smiled, exhausted and trembling, but still a smile. Someone had to. Nathan's penthouse was unlike anywhere Evie had ever seen. It took up the entire top floor of a high-rise overlooking Lake Michigan, with floor-to-ceiling glass that let Chicago's lights pour in like a river of brightness. The interior was minimalist but expensive, the sharp lines of modern furniture blending with artwork Evie was sure cost as much as the apartment she used to rent. This was not a hideout like the loft before. This was his real home, where he truly lived when he was not running from bombs and enemies. Evie stood by the glass, looking out at the city glittering below. It was almost 4 a.m, but Chicago was still awake, still living, still breathing. She could see a few cars moving along the highway, buildings with scattered windows still lit, and far out, the dark surface of Lake Michigan reflecting moonlight like a gigantic black mirror. Nathan came to stand beside her, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly bowed as if he were carrying the weight of the entire world. You want to know everything, she said, not turning to look at him. No more secrets. If I'm staying in this world, I need to know what I'm stepping into. Nathan was silent for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried a weariness she had never heard before. There's something I need to tell you. About your father. I'm Cower. Evie turned to him, brow furrowing. My father. He died when I was 12. A car accident. What does that have to do with you? Nathan did not look at her. He stared out at the city, storm eyes distant, as if he were looking into a different time, a different place. Your father didn't die in a car accident, Evie. He died 3 years ago, in prison. The words hit her like a fist to the chest. Evie felt her knees give, and she had to grab the window rail to keep herself upright. What? She whispered, her voice breaking. No, that's not possible. My mother told me he died in an accident, she cried at the funeral. I saw the casket. That casket was empty, Nathan said, finally turning to her, and there was pain in his eyes she had not expected. Your mother lied to protect you, so you wouldn't have to grow up with the truth that your father was sitting in prison. Prison, Evie stammered. For what? What did he do? Even. Nathan drew a deep breath, as if bracing for the next blow. Richard Carter worked for me. For 5 years, my chief accountant, managing every dollar that moved in and out of my empire. He paused, jaw tightening. He was loyal, careful, and good at the job. But he was also greedy. Evie felt the world around her cracking apart piece by piece. My father worked for the Mafia, she said. And it was not a question. He embezzled $3,800,000 from me over 3 years. Nathan continued, his voice flat as still water. Moved it into offshore accounts. Hid the trail so well it took me time to find it. When I did, I gave him a choice. Pay it back and leave the city, or face the consequences. You were going to kill him, Evie said, and she did not know if she was angrier or more hurt. I was going to do what I had to do, Nathan said, not denying it. But your father chose a third option I didn't expect. He walked straight into the police station and turned himself in, confessed to every financial crime he'd committed, not just against me but against legitimate clients before. He would rather sit in a legal prison than live in fear, waiting for my revenge. Tears slid down Evie's cheeks, and she did not bother wiping them away. He left my mother alone. He left me alone. He knew my mother was sick. He knew she needed money for treatment, and I didn't know. Nathan cut in, and his voice carried something she had not expected. Regret. When I ran your father's background after he was arrested, there was no record of a family. No wife, no child. He hid you and your mother from everything, maybe to protect you from my world. He paused, looking at her with a tormented expression. I didn't know Richard Carter had a 12-year-old daughter waiting for her father to come home. I didn't know you'd been told he was dead. I didn't know any of it until I ran your background after the night at the diner. Evie felt her knees refuse to hold her any longer. She sank down, sitting on the icy marble floor, and she cried. She cried for the father she thought had died 15 years ago. She cried for the years she had lived in poverty while he sat in prison. She cried for her mother, who had carried everything alone and taken that secret into her grave. Nathan sat down beside her, not touching her, only there, present in silence. He died in prison of a heart condition, he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard. 3 years ago. I didn't know until I checked the records after I met you. Evie cried until she had no tears left, and through it all, Nathan sat beside her, silent and waiting, as if he understood that some pain had to be fully felt before it could ever be healed. Evie did not know how long she had cried. Maybe a few minutes, maybe a few hours. Time seemed to lose all meaning when the entire foundation of her life had just been yanked out from under her like a rug. Her whole life was a lie. 15 years believing her father was dead. 15 years mourning a man who had still been alive. 15 years living in poverty while he sat in prison for greed. Her mother had known everything, and still chosen silence. Still chosen lies. Still chosen to let Evie grow up with a false memory of the father who had left them. When the tears finally ran dry, Evie lifted her head and saw Nathan still sitting beside her, his back against the glass wall, his gaze fixed on the skyline, slowly brightening with dawn. He did not speak, did not comfort her, did not try to make anything better. He was simply there, and somehow, that was enough. Why did you tell me? She asked, her voice raw from crying too hard. You could have kept this secret forever. I never would have known. Nathan turned to her, and in the faint dawn light his storm eyes looked softer than she had ever seen. Because you deserve the truth, he said. And because I don't want to build anything with you on a foundation of lies. I was not graded. He rose and crossed to the desk in the corner, opened a drawer, and took out a brown folder. He came back, sat beside her again, and placed the folder in her hands. What is this? She asked, staring at it as if it were an unexploded bomb. Your father's legacy, Nathan said. The $3,800,000 he embezzled from me, plus interest over the past 15 years. I transferred all of it into an account in your name this morning. Clean money, legal, untraceable. Gwedded. Evie opened the folder, and she saw numbers she could not believe. Nearly $5 million, sitting in an account under the name Evelyn Marie Carter. I don't want this money, she said, pushing the folder back toward Nathan. This is blood money. Money my father stole from a mafia boss. I don't want any connection to it. Nathan did not take the folder. He only looked at her with patient eyes. This is the only chance you have to build the life you deserve, he said. You can go to school, start a business, buy a home, live without working double shifts just to pay rent. Your father might have been greedy, but this is the only inheritance he left you. You can refuse it out of pride. or you can use it to build something good from the ashes he left behind. Evie looked down at the folder, then up at Nathan. And what about you? She asked. What do you want out of all of this? Tailed to greed. Nathan was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a sincerity she had never heard from him before. I want everything, he said. I want you to stay. I want to build a life with you, here, in this insane world. Not as something I own, or a weakness I have to protect, but as a companion, an equal partner, a partner in your criminal empire, Evie asked, but her voice did not hold the mockery she meant it to. A partner in my life, Nathan said. The empire can change. I've already started legalizing parts of the business. It will take time, but it isn't impossible. He lifted a hand and touched her cheek with a gentleness she did not think a man like him could possess. You saved me twice, Evie. Not just my life, but my soul. You reminded me I could be more than the monster I became. I don't know if I deserve you, but I want to try. Evie looked into those storm eyes, and she saw sincerity. She saw hope. She saw a man who had been shattered and was trying to find a way to put the pieces back together. If I stay, she said slowly, choosing each word with care, I want to know everything. No hiding, no secrets, no protecting me by keeping me in the dark. If I'm your partner, I need to be treated like someone who has a right to know. Nathan nodded without hesitation. Deal. Evie looked at the folder in her hands, then out at the glass where dawn was turning the Chicago horizon pink. A new day was beginning. A new life was waiting. Deal, she said. And for the first time in years, she felt like she was making a real choice for herself. 6 months later, Evie stood by the penthouse windows looking out at Chicago glittering in the sunset. She wore a silk dress the color of deep emerald, something 6 months ago she would not have dared to dream of touching, let alone owning. Her dark brown hair was swept into a neat bun, revealing a pair of small diamond earrings Nathan had given her on their wedding day. She had changed so much since that fateful night, not only on the outside but deep within. She was no longer the thin diner waitress with aching legs and $23 in her pocket. She was Evie Blackwood, the woman who had walked through fire and gunshots and found love in the last place anyone would have expected. Nathan's arm slid around her waist from behind, drawing her back into the warm strength of his chest. She felt his wedding ring brush her skin through the thin fabric, and she smiled as she glanced down at the matching band on her own hand. They had married in a small ceremony 3 months earlier, with only Cole, Derek, and a few of the closest people present. No spectacle, no extravagance, only 2 people who had found each other in chaos and decided not to let go. What are you thinking about? Nathan asked, his lips grazing her hair. The diner, Evie said, eyes drifting toward the south side in the distance. Ray called this morning. He said revenue is up 20% this month. Rosie's diner had been rebuilt from the rubble, bigger and better than before. Evie had used part of her inheritance to buy the land and build a new restaurant, but she kept the old name to honor what had been lost. Ray Martinez, the cook who had survived the explosion, was now the manager. He ran the place with a love and devotion Evie knew she could not have done better. And every evening, Mr. Patterson still came. He still sat in his familiar corner booth, reading yesterday's paper, and left $5 as a tip even though coffee was free for him now. Some things never changed, and Evie was grateful for that. On the bookshelf in her office, there was a stack of thank you cards from the Bennett sisters. Lily and Rose had survived because they were in the restroom when the bomb went off. They sent cards every month, sometimes with photos from the university they were attending thanks to the scholarship Evie quietly funded. They did not know where the money came from, and Evie wanted to keep it that way. Some of the best gifts were the ones given in silence. Alexei Volkov had kept his word. He left Chicago within 24 hours as promised, taking what remained of his empire and never coming back. Katya was safe, living somewhere in Europe according to Nathan's intelligence, far from the underworld she had never belonged to. You have a meeting with the lawyer tomorrow morning, Nathan said, his chin resting on the top of her head. About converting 3 more companies into legitimate operations. Evie smiled. Nathan had kept his promise. Step by step, he was pulling his empire out of the shadows and into the light. Not easily, not quickly, but he was doing it. For her. For the future they were building together. Nathan's hand slid down and rested gently on her stomach, where a small life was growing a little more every day. Has she kicked today? He asked, his voice soft in the way only Evie ever got to hear. Not yet. She placed her hand over his. It's only 3 months. It's still early. 3 months. Evie still was not used to the idea that a child was growing inside her, a child born from a love she never thought she would find. Her and Nathan's baby, who would grow up in a different world than the one Nathan once lived in, a world they were trying to build every day. From the ashes, Evie whispered, remembering the night the diner burned and her life changed forever. We built something extraordinary, Nathan finished, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Evie turned in his arms and lifted her face to those storm eyes she loved more than anything in the world now. And this is only the beginning, she said, then rose on her toes and kissed him. Outside the glass, Chicago kept moving to its own rhythm, millions of stories unfolding on every street. But here, in this penthouse, their story was being written forward every day, one chapter at a time. A poor diner waitress and a cold mafia boss, two broken people who found each other and learned how to love in the middle of violence and chaos. They had lost so much, but they had found more than they ever dared to dream. And the child growing inside Evie would be proof that out of darkness, light could still be born. This story teaches us that life is never a straight line. Sometimes tragedies that feel like an ending are the beginning of something miraculous. Evie walked into that diner that night as a tired girl with aching legs, but she walked out as someone entirely different. It is a lesson in courage, in daring to act when instinct tells you to, even when you do not know what the consequences will be. It is also a lesson in forgiveness and mercy, in seeing the real person behind the armor life forces them to wear. Nathan might be a monster in the eyes of the world, but Evie saw the broken heart inside and chose healing instead of judgment. My friends, if this story touched your heart, please hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next moving stories. A like and a share from you will be a huge encouragement for us to keep bringing you quality content every day. We would love to know how you feel about Evie and Nathan's story. Have you ever experienced a fateful moment that changed your life? Do you believe love can bloom in the last places anyone would expect? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We truly want to hear your stories and feelings from the deepest part of your hearts. Thank you sincerely for spending your time with us all the way to the very end. Wishing everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and a heart full of love every day. May you always find light even in the darkest moments, just as Evie did. Goodbye, and see you again in the next video.